Hello and welcome to the Odds Now YouTube channel. You're watching the first edition of our brand new EFL Betting Show here on the channel. And if you're visiting for the first time, well, good to see you. I hope you're going to stick around. My name is Matt Hill. You'll see me right across the channel on all manner of events. But I must say I'm looking forward to this one because I am an EFL fan, as some viewers will know, big Carlisle United fan. And I'm delighted to have a man with an encyclopedic knowledge of EFL joining me on this, and he's going to be joining us on a weekly basis, hopefully. So, Mr. Gab Sutton, I will hand over to you. Gab, it is an honour to have you on the show, someone with your depth of knowledge. I don't know how you cram in all that information across 72 clubs, but yeah, honoured to have you on, mate. How are you doing? And looking forward to it.
That's very kind of you to say, Matt. Yeah, honoured to be on the show as well. Thanks so much for having me and looking forward to getting started.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So just give you a little flavour. We're going to keep it nice and informal, basically. But anyone who's watched our Premier League betting show on the channel, we generally would go through every game and give a little bit of analysis and a best bet. But obviously there you only have 10 games across the EFL. We have 36 to contend with. So what we've done is we've picked out 2 or 3 from each division. We're just going to go through them. Gab's going to give us a little bit of insight. I might chime in here and there, and then we'll settle on a best bet. And then at the end of the show, I'll wrap up all our best bets on a nice graphic so you can see all of Gab's selections. I'll force him into picking a nap, and maybe we'll do a little fun double as well, just to give you a few ideas ahead of placing your rackers at the weekend. We start, obviously, with the Championship. And Gab, Sheffield Wednesday versus West Brom is a lunchtime kickoff on Saturday. West Brom have had a fantastic start to the season, but I know you're maybe sensing that Sheffield Wednesday are a little bit too big in the early betting markets.
Yeah, this is more of a price-related pick, Matt, because I've got a huge amount of respect for West Brom and Carlos Corberán. I think he's one of the best managers in the division, and I'm sure West Bromwich Albion are going to be in that top 6 this season. So this isn't so much opposing West Brom, but was it 21-10 Sheffield Wednesday are at home? I think that's a huge price for a team that I think have already shown that at their very best are among the best teams in the league, as we saw against Plymouth Argyle on the opening day. Now, they did have a bit of a dip after that, and they weren't able to maintain those levels, but the last couple of performances, even if they've only got 1 point from them due to conceding late goals, it does show that they're getting back to their best. And I think that if they can find that clinical edge, then I've got a feeling they've got a better chance of getting the 3 points than maybe those odds suggest. So if this was at the Hawthorns, I wouldn't argue with Sheffield Wednesday being 21-10. But I think, given that it's at Hillsborough, I think they've got a good, maybe a better chance of getting all 3 points than those odds imply.
I just wonder what you make of it at Sheffield Wednesday. I've seen like very small murmurs about Danny Roll with that tough start they've had results-wise, but he's a fantastic manager for my money. He's one of the best in the division, isn't he? I know you're a fan yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think some of the football that he's encouraged this team to play, I like Svante and Jelson in midfield. I think he's the patterns of play that we've seen from Sheffield Wednesday so far this season have been brilliant. I think they've maybe had issues fine-tuning the balance a little bit and making sure that their defence has had enough protection when they do go forward. But I think if they can strike that balance, then I think they can be a really good team in this division. So, yeah, I'm happy to go with Sheffield Wednesday at the prices on offer.
Just before we move on, while we've got West Brom up on the screen there, Josh Madger as well. Unbelievable start to the season for him. He's actually into favourite in the betting now for the Championship Golden Boot. Do you feel like this is a scoring streak that he can sustain? Because really, in his career before now, we've not really thought of him as somebody hitting the back of the net every week, but he's flying high with confidence, isn't he? Do you think he's going to sustain this scoring run?
Yeah, I think at the moment it's looking like he's got a great chance. I remember him doing brilliantly for Sunderland. I think it was in the 18-19 season, and then they sold him to somewhere in France, I think in January that year, and maybe he hasn't had it all his own way since then. But he started this season on fire, didn't he, with that hat-trick at QPR. And I suppose I look at the top goal scorer possibilities elsewhere in the league. If we think Leeds, for instance, are going to be the absolute favourites, Leeds, you wouldn't say have got that clinical goal scorer. Bamford's not quite at the level he maybe was a few years ago. They've got Mathieu Joseph, who's starting up top now, who's still very raw and not necessarily confident that he's going to be top goal scorer. Sunderland, who were my pick, you wouldn't necessarily say they've got a player that's going to grab all the goals. So I think there is an opening there for Josh Maja to get the top goal scorer. I imagine he's about 9-1, 10-1, is he, something like that?
He is. I think he's about 8s now, but you're right in what you say. Like the competition there from the top sides is not a lot of the goals are shared around, aren't they? I suppose Latte at Middlesbrough, maybe Haji Wright and the likes, but even he's sharing his goals out of Coventry a little bit. So, yeah, just an interesting one. I hope he can sustain it because he's a player I have a lot of time for, Josh Maja. But yeah, Gab leaning towards the upset there. Sheffield Wednesday, 21-10, current best price with William Hill. So I like that. A nice outsider to start the weekend off. We move on to a 3 p.m. next kickoff and Oxford at home to Burnley. Now, on the face of it, this feels like the kind of game that your casual bettor might stroll into their betting shop or get their app out and put Burnley on their accumulator straight away. But I know you've got a little bit of a word of warning for that, Gab, haven't you?
Yeah, so I think Burnley, are a good counter-attacking side. I think the way they seem to play under Scott Parker is sort of long passes down the sides that kind of open teams up, and they've got Luca Koleosho, who's been quite dangerous as well. But I'm not necessarily sure that when they face a team that's a deep defensive block that's very compact, I'm not sure they've got what it takes to really unlock teams. And it took them a long time, deep into stoppage time against Portsmouth last week, to find the winner. And I think it's been recognised among fans that that's an area that they might struggle with under Scott Parker. So you've got that issue against an Oxford side that have been very well drilled under Des Buckingham and enjoy playing on the counter-attack. So I've got a feeling that Oxford, given that they've had 3 tough home games so far this season and have done well in all of them, especially against Norwich on the opening day, I'm liking that 27-10 on Des Buckingham's side. So, yeah, if you wanted to go for an upset, I'd also possibly suggest the double chance if you don't want to go for the outright. But, yeah, I think Oxford could surprise for you this weekend.
Oxford, 3 wins from 3 at home. Unbelievable start to the season. You touch on Des Buckingham there. What is it in particular you like about him as a young coach? What do you feel his strongest assets are?
I think he's a very modern leader. I think he's been very honest about the challenges he had when he first came in at Oxford. I think his whole style of play is very much based on having good wide players, and he didn't have that in his first 4 months, which is why they weren't able to find form straight away. And Oxford fans were sort of wondering a little bit what they had. But if you look at Des Buckingham's coaching profile, anywhere he's been across the world, he's made an impact on players and he's had success, whether that's in Australia, whether that's in India, whether that's in New Zealand or in England. So he's always been successful and improved individual players whilst leading teams to success, and that's with international football as well. So I think this is a very talented coach, and he seems to be coming onto the mainstream scene now.
Just before we move on from this game, just to touch on Burnley while we've got them up, Scott Parker, it was an appointment that polarised opinion, didn't it? And they had a very hot start, which kind of dispelled a lot of the talk around Parker, but they're second favourites for this league behind Leeds. Do you view them as the second strongest team in the Championship?
No, I'm personally not convinced that they're going to finish in the playoffs.
Oh, big call.
Yeah,
big call.
I think that I'm not sure that Scott Parker is going to. I think there could be issues behind the scenes. I think there's mixed reviews on Scott Parker as a manager in terms of his handling both of players and also managing upstairs. When at Bournemouth, at the end of his time there, he said, we weren't prepared for the Premier League after a 9-0 loss at Liverpool and were sacked, I think, the next day. So I think there's a question mark for me over Scott Parker and whether he's got what's required. Plus the fact that they've got, I think it's 35 players in that senior squad. That's a lot of players to manage and keep happy. So I think there's going to be problems there, and I'm not sure that it's going to go the way Burnley fans are hoping.
Hey, we'll move it on then. We do have one more game in the Championship to take a look at, and it's a team that myself and Gab are both mutually behind this season, as we discussed off camera, both supporting Sunderland. I know Gab took a lot of grief for putting them up as his title winners. Those people have gone a bit quiet now. Obviously, a long, long way to go, but what a start for Regis Lebris' side. They've been fantastic to watch. They go away to Watford this weekend, confidence high. Watford had a bit of a shaky time of things recently after a good start, and you think Sunderland look quite a nice price here, Gab.
Yeah, 6-4. I really like that one. I saw Watford in their extended highlights to their game last week in that 4-1 loss at Carrow Road, and something looked really amiss for me in terms of without the ball, they look very disorganised. Players losing their men. They've not really got that solid presence in midfield. I don't really think Sissoko does that. I don't think Dele Bashiru does that against Man City. Away in the League Cup in midweek, they didn't even operate with a recognised central midfielder, and for me that's a massive problem for Watford. I think they've been able to get by through sort of clinical finishing and some good moments in their first few games, but actually I'm not sure that they're necessarily as good as the table suggests. Whereas I look at Sunderland and I like the pressing structure that Regis Lebris has implemented, and that's given them a platform for the individual talent in that squad to really express themselves. So, yeah, I think Sunderland are a better team than Watford. I really like them at 6-4.
To touch on Watford a little bit, because I know that there was a lot of you were among them yourself. A lot of people sort of worried for Watford. They made a good start in terms of results. You touch on it there that you think the results may have flattered them a little bit in the season's early weeks. Just generally on Tom Cleverley, then, if he does sort of stabilise this Watford side and get a mid-table finish, is it a case of he deserves more credit than he's been given by a lot of people? Do you think he's got it? Like, what I'm getting at is, do you think Tom Cleverley's lack of experience is the main problem for this Watford side, or is it deeper rooted than that?
Well, obviously it's deeper rooted because I think Watford are a club that have had some problems for a few years now, and I'm not sure they've quite got to the root of that. But I do worry a little bit about Tom Cleverley. Not that I don't think he's a talented coach, because I think we've seen glimpses of that. But I feel like the fact that he was a player for Watford and still knows some of the current squad in those terms makes me worry a little bit as to whether he's got that steeliness, that ruthlessness that you're going to need. And some of those issues that we saw at Norwich last time out, I don't know if Tom Cleverley is going to really show his authority and say to somebody like Moussa Sissoko, you're not going to be in the team now. If you're going to jog when we've not got the ball, you're not getting in my team. Because you look at, I think if you want to have success in football, Matt, one of the biggest things is you set a culture, a code of conduct that you've got to live by if you get into that team, because that's how you set standards. And I'm just wondering, I'm not saying he can't do that, but I'm curious to see whether Tom Cleverley has the ruthlessness and the steeliness required to see out, because that, for me, that's what Watford need at the moment.
To put you on the spot then, if Watford were, and I hope this doesn't happen obviously for Tom, but if there's to reach a point in this season where they do disperse with Tom Cleverley's services, what kind of manager do you think could come in and give what you're saying maybe missing in that Watford culture and dressing room?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think it definitely needs to be somebody who has it within themselves to not accept anything that's sort of substandard in terms of
In the
work
standards,
ethic
yeah.
and commitment. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a really important thing that Watford needs at the moment. I think there's probably some challenges for Watford in the sense that they've got a sporting director called Gianluca Nani, who's also sporting director at Udinese. Now, unless you're travelling by flu powder between Watford and Udinese, that slightly brings some logistical challenges, shall we say. So there's a few things like that I feel is a little bit amiss behind the scenes. And that's one of the things that worries me. So I think it's a difficult gig, but it probably does need somebody to come in and sort of lay down the law, both upstairs perhaps and downstairs.
Just before we move on to this Sunderland, I've said we're both big fans of them. I know you're backing them to win this particular game. So many young stars in this team, too many to list, to be honest. But is there one player in that Sunderland side that you believe is destined for the very, very top? I mean, Rigg maybe comes to mind for me, but, as an obvious one. But there's a few in there, isn't there?
Yeah, Chris Rigg, I think, is a phenomenal talent. When you think he got into their FA Cup squad at Shrewsbury Town 2 seasons ago, and now he's 17 now. So the fact that you can get into an FA Cup squad at 15 is just absolutely remarkable. And I do wonder if he can be another Jude Bellingham, possibly, without putting undue pressure on the lad, because the maturity that he plays with for his age is remarkable. And even with Joe Bellingham, Jude's brother, it's some of the control that he's shown are almost, dare I say, shades of Zidane with the control that he has in tight areas. I know that's a bit of an out statement,
yeah.
But for me, this is the thing with Sunderland. Like, this is a group of players that they've gone for a very youth-dominated recruitment policy, but actually, they've had some of these players have had a couple of seasons under their belt now of regular Championship football, and they got to the playoffs at this level 2 seasons ago. And last season, they were in around it before Tony Mowbray was controversially sacked, and then Michael Beale kind of really destabilised things behind the scenes. But to be honest, I think all Regis Lebris needed to do was kind of be a steady hand on this squad, be a sort of gentle influence, and get in a proper pressing structure. And I think in terms of the talent, the quality of Rigg, of Bellingham, of Jack Clark's gone now, but Patrick Roberts, Romain Mundell, Meyender's even coming into it, Trey Humer. I'm going through the whole 11 now, aren't I? But I think basically they just needed a manager who can be a steady hand, and kind of the talent has just grown organically, and I think that's what we're seeing at the moment.
Yeah, fantastic to see. Long may it continue as a Sunderland backer.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
how away the lads.
Yeah, how away the lads. Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't really be saying that in Carlisle, really. We don't really like to associate ourselves with the Northeast. But anyway, I do. I will for purposes of my bet. Yeah, Sunderland to beat Watford for Gab then 6-4. We will bring all of Gab's best bets up on the screen at the end of the video, so you can sort of jot down and see which ones you want to go with. On to League One then. And we start with a team that has suffered a managerial departure. And, for every time that somebody hires a manager that didn't work, somebody loses their manager. And I'm sure all of us as football fans have lost a manager that we've loved. It is tough. It can rock a football club for a long time, and it can leave fans pretty emotional, I think. I've got some sad memories of losing managers. Losing Paul Simpson as a youngster for Carlisle was to go to Preston was just couldn't wrap my head around that. I still can't really, but yeah. Anyway, I've not held a grudge. Anyway, we've gone past that since. A lot of water under the bridge. But yeah, Crawley versus Bolton, of course, is the game that I am referring to here. And Scott Lindsay has left Crawley and dropped down a division, although you could say an upwardly mobile move in the long term to go to MK Dons. Mm-hmm. I think that's a good hire for them. I'm sure we'll come on to that a little bit later on. Yeah. But Bolton, meanwhile, Ian Evatt has been, at times in his Bolton reign, has looked untouchable. But in more recent times has come under quite severe pressure from large swathes of that fan base. However, a massive 5-2 win, I think it was, in the league last time out. Obviously, he had a tough old time things in the cup away at Arsenal, but just those kind of fixtures you just need to go and enjoy, I suppose. But no, the last league outing seemed to be a positive side for Bolton, and you'd think they could take advantage of Crawley in a little bit of disarray potentially, Gab.
Yeah, I think that 5-2 was it 5-2 victory over Huddersfield last weekend was just huge, wasn't it, for Ian Evatt, because they lost. No, it was against Reading 5-2. Huddersfield was 4-0 defeat. I think it was absolutely huge because after that a home defeat to Huddersfield, the knives were out for Ian Evatt. Something, people were saying something felt a little bit wrong. People worried that they were going a bit backwards. And it was and for me, it sort of felt a little bit amiss to go that early on it. But that was how Bolton fans that I'd spoken to sort of felt. And I think Ian Evatt, after that game himself, was saying, look, I'm going to have some big conversations with the people upstairs. And, he was almost questioning it. And I kind of... I think the fact that those conversations went well and that the board and, in key figures at the club still had support for Everett kind of, I suppose, gave him the leeway to start afresh a little bit. And I almost wonder if he got himself a haircut in the week between the games. And I almost wonder if that sort of thing psychologically, it's like starting afresh. I don't know whether
Fresh
there's
start,
anything.
fresh
Exactly.
trim, fresh start. Yeah, I
Exactly,
like it.
fresh trims, fresh start. And they won 5-2. So whether for any manager out there getting a haircut, if you need to
Pushing for the
change,
haircuts,
absolutely, maybe that's the trick. But yeah, that felt huge, and I think the hat trick for Dion Charles and the performance of Josh Sheehan in midfield, who had a brilliant free kick, that just felt like a really significant result for Bolton Wanderers and Ian Evatt. And I feel like they are going to build on that. And I think, yes, they're in similar positions in terms of the league table, but actually Crawley squad versus Bolton squad, it's incomparable, really, isn't it? So for me, Bolton Wanderers are a shade of odds on, 17 to 20. I really like that price. So I'm happy to go with that as my nap, actually, for the weekend selections.
I must say as well, I was expecting them to be a little bit shorter. And to be honest, I would not be surprised to see that price contract between now when we're speaking on Thursday afternoon and Saturday afternoon, because often the markets can take a little bit of time to react to these lower league managerial changes, and it's quite a significant one, isn't it? Scott Lindsay, what a fantastic job he's done there. Without giving too much away, MK Dons' match is on the agenda, so we will touch a little bit more on Scott Lindsay shortly. We do have one
big loss for Crawley Town, given what Scott Lindsay
huge
did.
Absolutely huge. Actually, I'll tell you what, before we move on, it's only fair that we give a little bit of time to what he achieved at Crawley there, because it was a remarkable job he did, wasn't it? And,
sure.
And let's not forget, Lindsay had been in at Swindon beforehand. He'd not had the best of times there, really. Bit of a sour end. And it's been a fantastic project to watch. And I must admit, from afar, with the ownership, I mean, we'd probably need a video all on its own to discuss Crawley's ownership. But I had my concerns about them. They were favourites for relegation. They ended up getting promoted. Amazing job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, listen, those few points that they've got under Scott Lindsay at the start of the season could be really valuable for
Yeah.
I'm worried about them without him, because I think he's a fantastic coach. I've been lucky enough to deal with him, in the game, interviewing him, and he's always been so approachable and so kind in the way that he speaks to people. And he's actually got a vulnerable side to him as well, which I think allows him to sort of connect with people on a deeper level, but he's also an incredible coach with some really innovative ideas as well. So I think for Crawley to lose that, I think, is a big blow, and you do wonder what direction their season's going to take under the next manager.
Do quite possibly a team we'll be mentioning in future weeks as well, as they do look a little bit vulnerable at the moment in this current, but we'll see who comes in. It'd be interesting to see what direction they go. The ownership certainly not afraid to do things a little bit differently, so we shall see. One more game to touch on in League One then, and Stevenage versus Charlton is that fixture. Gab, our other games, we've kind of had a strong lean one way or the other. This one, I know it's more about the goal line, isn't it? You see this being a cagey affair, shall we say?
I think it's going to be a cagey game. Definitely one for the no goal scorer bet as well. But I've gone with under 2.5 goals at 6-4, because although I did see Stevenage beat Barnsley 3-0 a couple of weeks ago, I still feel that going forward, they've not got the firepower so much. They're top. They have got a lot of strikers, but a lot of them are unavailable at the moment. And they've got Jamie Reid, who was their big talisman last season, has still taking some time to find full fitness, I think, and full sharpness. And I think there's a few reasons as to why, although they've looked positive. It's been a positive start for them under Alex Ravel, and they are looking progress. I think they've got the solidity that we saw from them under Steve Evans last season, and they're pretty aggressive in the press as well. They got themselves a good point at Wigan in midweek, but I still don't see them cutting teams open regularly, and I think that they're going to struggle in the final third. So, but while Charlton, on the other hand, they're missing Miles Leaburn at top, and his return's going to be big for them. But they do look short on creativity under Nathan Jones. I think a lot of their wins have been sort of grabbing a goal via a set piece and sort of taking a small number of chances and keeping a clean sheet. So for me, under 2.5 goals for that one, 4-6. I like that bet.
I just want to pick your brains a little bit on Alex Ravel, because obviously he's come back for another crack at Stevenage, and fantastic playing career, really likeable centre forward. When I think about lower league centre forwards, he does come to mind as one of the sort of great at what he did, and you want to see him do well. And he spoke when he came back in Stevenage about learning from the first crack and stuff, and obviously went and worked in the backroom staff with Steve Evans, one of the most experienced managers around. Do you think? Have you seen evidence that Ravel is a better manager than he was first time around, or are you still sort of? Is it too early to make that assessment?
I definitely think he's a better manager than he was first time around. I think first time around he was only just retired from playing, and I think he said himself in his first interview that first time around he wasn't ready, and I kind of liked his honesty. But since then he's learnt from Steve Evans and Paul Rayner, and even now he's got Scott Cuthbert alongside him, who's a real warrior as well, and he's got Neil Banfield, who's a very experienced figure in the game. He's worked with Arsenal and right at the top level. So again, I think Neil Banfield can be a sort of quiet source of knowledge and inspiration, I suppose. So for me, Alex Ravel, I think he's a talented coach. He clearly seems to. I think with Steve Evans, he can have success in a certain period of time, but I think the second half of last season, maybe things went a little bit awry in the dressing room, and the way he manages kind of possibly rubbed people up the wrong way at the end of his time there. Much so he was successful for in the whole, of course. But I think that it was possibly the right time for a bit of change, and I think Alex Ravel's a new voice, a different type of personality, and I think actually that's something that the players might welcome, as well as, by the way, I actually think Stevenage's squad is stronger than it was last season, and they did finish 9th last year. So I think lots of people underestimated Stevenage last season, but I think they'll be right as rain.
Yeah. And Charlton as well, someone who I've quite fancied for a big season myself. I've backed them for a top 6 finish. And you're right in what you said. It hasn't been spectacular, but it's been very sort of Nathan Jonesy, hasn't he? He's just got them very efficient defensively. And how much more progress are you expected to see from Charlton between now and end of the season? You still think there's a long way to go for them?
Yeah, well, they've not lost many games under Nathan Jones, which is both this season and going back to last. I think what they've got, though, is they've got defenders who can score like Lloyd Jones. They've got Luke Berry, who scored against Leyton Orient on week 2. And I think they seem to be able to score from a low volume of attacks. Now, I do think they're going to be able to, they've got to be able to create a few more chances in order to sustain the level that they're at, because I do think that creativity is looking a little bit dry at the moment. But I also back them to keep the goals out, and they've got the best defensive record in the division at the moment. So that suggests that the defence that they've got is doing the business. And I think with Macaulay Gillespie, Lloyd Jones, Romani Edmonds Green, and Thierry Small there, I think, and Small and Ramsey being the wing backs, I think they've got some solid foundations.
Yeah, certainly do. Under 2.5 goals in this game, 4-6 right across the board. So yeah, it's hard to argue against that, really. Yeah, definitely one for your both teams to score no as well, if you like to play that one as well, I would say. Let's move on to League Two then. 2 in League Two. I already touched on Scott Lindsay's departure to Crawley to MK Dons. The first game of the Lindsay era will be away to Bromley, who made a fantastic start to life in the EFL, maybe just regressing to the mean a little bit in the last couple of weeks. And MK Dons, well, it's well documented their sort of sluggish start to the season under Mike Williamson, who has since been poached by my team, Carlisle. That felt like a good move for all parties, to be honest, from where I'm standing. Maybe MK MK ready for a change and new owners ready to put their own stamp on things. We've already discussed Scott Lindsay and what a fantastic appointment that looks to be on the surface. Gab, I'm always a little bit sceptical of how much impact a new manager can make within 2 or 3 days on the training pitch. But one thing that does always seem to happen, and Carlisle certainly saw this last weekend, was Williamson, is it does just lift the spirits within the club and seems to breathe confidence into the squad, doesn't it? And you'd expect something similar with this ultra talented MK Dons group.
Well, I think the advantage Scott Lindsay has is that he's already coming into a squad that's geared to play the way he wants to play. And that's worked under Mike Williamson, who already encourages that style of football anyway. So I don't think it's. I think he can put a different spin on things, but it's not like he's overseeing a complete sea change in identity, which is always difficult to do in season. So yeah, I'm pretty confident that Scott Lindsay can slot in nicely and hit the ground running. And if anything, he can be a different voice and possibly. Motivate players in a different way, and I back him to have a positive impact on the club. So yeah, I'm happy to back MK Dons to get that victory at Bromley. And I think, by the way, as well, if you look pound for pound, I think MK Dons have got a far better squad on paper than Bromley. The game's not played on paper, but I think to get them at 13-10, I think is a pretty good price.
Does always help, doesn't it, having that extra quality? And I suppose Bromley, they would have been really happy with how they've adapted to life in the EFL. I didn't see too many people tipping Bromley to struggle this year. I think there was a general acceptance that when these teams come up from that battle-hardened National League, they are generally ready to compete in League Two. There's not a massive gap between the top of the National League and the bottom end of League Two, I don't think, these days. But like inevitably, as teams get more data on Bromley and see how Bromley want to play, you will have teams with better resources, better players finding how they want to play against them. What have you made of what you've seen of Bromley so far? Have you been impressed? And do you think there's scope for them to progress further, or do you think they just kind of need to be happy with keeping their heads above water this season?
Yeah, I like Danny Imray, the wing-back they've got on loan from Crystal Palace. He looks pretty bright. I think getting Cameron Congreve from Swansea was a good move. And they've obviously got Michael Cheek, who's in form as well as he has been in the National League over the last few years. So I think they've got a good chance of staying up, but I'm not sure that they're going to do much more than survive. Yeah, I like Andy Woodman, and clearly he's the right person for that football club because he's done a great job there.
Yeah, great character. Need more of them. Good luck to Bromley, but not this weekend because we're back in MK Dons to win there. Final fixture that we'll be looking at this week is again in League Two, and it is Cheltenham versus Fleetwood. Now, Gab, this is a team you were telling me off camera you've seen play a couple of times live already this season, which also always gives you an advantage and a bit more confidence when you're trying to make an assessment of the team when you've seen them with your own eyes, I always think. And Fleetwood were a team that I did an anti-post betting preview on the YouTube channel for the EFL, and Fleetwood were a team I felt could outrun their odds and maybe push towards the top 7. I really quite like their squad, and I've been quite impressed with Charlie Adam. They'll be fairly happy with their start. Obviously, they played a game less than most of the league, but they're still in that mix at the moment. Very early days, of course, but I know you want to be with Fleetwood here. Is that more based on what you've seen of Cheltenham, though?
A bit both, Matt. I like Charlie Adam. I think if you look at Fleetwood's first half against Morecambe, they were absolutely dominant. Couldn't quite hold on to the victory, but I've been impressed by Fleetwood, both actually at the start of this season and also what we saw from them in the second half of last season under Charlie Adam, where they did make improvement. And I do wonder if Charlie Adam had come in when Scott Brown left last season, Fleetwood might have stayed up. But yeah, I've seen Cheltenham twice this season, and actually they won both games. Actually, they beat Newport and Harrogate, but both times I wasn't really convinced by them. One of my worries with Cheltenham, because when I saw them against Harrogate, they had a striker called Matty Taylor up top, and he's 35 now, and he literally can't run. So if you're a centre-back facing Cheltenham Town, where Matty Taylor's one of the two strikers, you're likely going to get a lot of time and space, because you're not going to be under any pressure. So that, for me, that allowed Harrogate, who I think are one of the worst teams in the league, possibly, that allowed them to completely control the play in the first half of that game. and they didn't, they allowed their midfielders to get on the ball without any real pressure. And so that's kind of a worry for me from Cheltenham's point of view, that they're not able to impose themselves on games so much when Matty Taylor starts, and Michael Flynn seems to want to start him because of his goal scoring record and all that kind of thing. So I'm worried about Cheltenham. I always feel like whenever I watch them play, the opponent tends to have more chances than they do. And so, I'm not really convinced by them. And I think one of the better sides in the league, which I would class Fleetwood as, I don't think they're one of the best. I don't think they're as good as Chesterfield or Doncaster or, the real top sides, but I do think they are, a good team that could challenge for the playoffs this season. I think Fleetwood will show that superiority.
Fleetwood for Gab then. That does round off our best bets for this week. So I think we've covered 7 games in total. They've done it in reasonable fashion as well, time-wise. I'm going to try and, bring Gab's best bets up on screen if I just remove that one and get that one in on the bottom. So some lovely prices there, Gab. To be fair to you, you've not really gone for many sort of strong favourites. Quite a lot of away wins there as well. But I thought compelling cases made for all of them. I know you've already touched on this, but Bolton to beat Crawley 17-20, that would be your nap, yeah?
Yeah, that's my nap. And I've also got a double of MK Dons to beat Bromley at 13-10 and Fleetwood to beat Cheltenham at 6-4. And that's the equivalent of 47-10 as a double, which, considering that I think, if you ask yourselves individually, are MK Dons better than Bromley? The answer is yes. Are Fleetwood better than Cheltenham? I think the answer is yes. Both for them both to win, to get odds of nearly 5-1. I think that's pretty good. So I like that double, 47-10, and I also like Bolton to beat Crawley at 17-20.
Excellent. That is excellent stuff. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed that. I really hope you enjoyed that too. Do make sure that you let us know what you're backing this weekend in the comments across the EFL, and just let us know what you thought of the show as well. If you enjoyed the show, if there's anything you'd like to see added to it, very open-minded on format and structure. We'd like to keep it as informal as possible and just have a good old chat about all things EFL. Gab, it's been an absolute pleasure dissecting this weekend's fixtures with you. I will keep a close eye on your selections, and we'll be sure to keep a tally of your results, so there's nowhere to hide throughout the season. Gab will be rejoining myself next week. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you again very soon.